The Sony Fx9, the FX6, the F3, the A7s3, three of which have the same sensor, C500 Mark II, the Panasonic S1H, the Alexa LF, the Red Monstro, and now the Raptor, the Kinefinity Mavo Edge. You get the point. Large format, Vista vision, full frame, and I mean stills full frame. Anyway, large format has not just arrived, but is now a widely available standard available to filmmakers at all levels. And low budget filmmakers stand to benefit from bucking the trend and sticking with Super 35. What? This is 5 reasons you don't need a full frame cinema camera. Number 1, independent filmmakers stand to benefit from Super 35 cameras going for lower prices as they don't fit the hot full frame trend. Quite simply because the full frame trend is so strong right now and companies recognize it as a new way to sell us stuff, a lot of still very good used Super 35 cameras like the Arri Alexa, Red Epic, Scarletts and Heliums, and I know some of these are slightly larger than Super 35. Anyway, they're going for considerably cheaper prices on the used market than they were just a year or two ago. And they're still outstanding motion picture cameras. We've owned a Scarlett MX and a Scarlett W and loved them. Loved them. We picked up a used Arri Alexa Classic for $5,000 US with around 800 hours on it, 8 memory cards, PL and EF mount earlier this year. That's become our main narrative camera with a mix of Blackmagic cameras, including the Ursa G2 and 6K Pro being our main corporate work cameras. Have you noticed that like Super 35 cameras are not really any brand's flagship cinema camera anymore, except of course for the Blackmagic Ursa Mini Pro 12K, which can be had at the bargain price of $6,000 US. That's insane. Would it sell for that price if it was full frame? Not likely. If you look at the other sort of manufacturers, full frame is carrying the flag. So if you're buying new, you can have a really high quality Super 35 digital cinema camera for considerably less than a full frame one. What's not unexpected and wonderful to hear from the likes of Arri is that, and I quote, "We at Arri believe in Super 35. Not everybody will shoot large format / full frame. Many productions, in particular on TV, will remain with Super 35 for the foreseeable future. Therefore, we are also working on a dedicated Super 35 4K camera, not LF, further increasing the choices for cinematographers." The key here is choice.
Why, Mr. Anderson? Why do you persist?
Because I choose to.
And if we can get past the hype, the FOMO, the thinking that the camera gear is going to magically make our work twice as good, we can see that large format is just that, a choice. Now, don't expect Arri's Super 35mm 4K camera to be a budget option. One can dream, but there's outstanding new and used Super 35 digital cinema cameras out there offering incredible bang for your buck for filmmaking. I think today, the undoubtable best value S35 cinema camera is the Pocket 6K Pro, which has an S35 sensor, dual native ISO, about 13 stops of dynamic range, a bright articulating OLED screen, internal NDs, 2 mini XLR inputs, takes those cheap Sony NP570 batteries, 3 if you add the battery grip, which I thoroughly recommend, and it records 4K ProRes and 6KB RAW, and it includes DaVinci Resolve for 2500. No autofocus and no IBIS. Great tools for content production, not traditionally used for narrative filmmaking, so like a non-issue in my opinion when used for that purpose. Honestly, if I were a young filmmaker today, that's the camera I'd buy. Yes, it has a slow read speed, so no whip pans, but at that price and feature set and that image, it's a no-brainer, in my opinion, even if it's just as a B cam. Point 2, over-the-top shallow depth of field can be impractical for narrative filmmaking. I love the shallow depth of field aesthetic, and full frame makes this easier to achieve. I don't have to open up the aperture as much to where a lens's weaknesses, softness, chromatic aberration, and other issues may start to rear their head. Or you can just shoot wide open and achieve a look you simply can't on Super 35. You also don't need to shoot on as wide a lens to get the field of view you want, which can mean less distortion, depending on the lens. I find this dreamy look's often received really well for branded content work when you're just trying to make things pretty and portrait-like all the time. But far out, trying to keep actors moving around a scene in focus, like even at T2, can be a challenge for a really good AC. A shallow depth of field can often be a nice cover for poor or non-existent production design or poor composition. When things are a bit clearer, it forces you to get your shit together in other areas. Shooting wide open can look cool, but it's often impractical, especially on independent productions when you're stretched for money, time, sleep, and personnel. My third point, cheaper lenses, sort of, sometimes. Super 35 cinema lenses are finally starting to drop in price a bit, and APS-C still lenses are generally cheaper than their full frame counterparts anyway. We just picked up the Sony Cine Ultra Primes version 2, the metal ones, in mint condition for less than 9K US. That's 6 PL lenses with really great optical performance, T2, color matched, all the same length bar the 135mm, with 240 degree focus rotation across the set. They're just heavy as and have no brand recognition, but we don't rent out our gear, so that's not an issue for us. If you're interested in a dedicated video on the Cine Ultra Primes version 2, let me know. There's not a lot online about them, but let me know in the comments and let me know what you might want to know or see should you consider picking up a set used. Point is, there's bargains to be had out there on the used market, and because full frame is all the rage, there's some excellent deals to be had for glass that was never designed to cover a larger than super 35mm sensor. I think many filmmakers deem them not future-proof, and therefore they're more reluctant to buy, and it's for that reason I think that's bringing prices down a notch. It's just a supply-demand thing. Not to mention, there's a plethora of cinema glass designed for S35 available to rent or buy because it's been the standard, for cinema for so long. I haven't used them yet, but the DZO Pictor zooms can be had for, I think, less than 5,200 US, covering you at T2.8 from 20 to 125 millimeters. That's nuts. Okay, they're big and they're heavy, but you're not going to get parfocal large format coverage of that range at that price. Fourth point, there's so much more to the final image than the camera. In a world where cinema cameras depreciate in value faster than cars, saving money on a large format flagship camera purchase, and yes, I know there's some great value full frame options like the S1H, the A7s3, Fx6 and 9, but generally speaking, when available, a company's S35 counterpart will be cheaper. Saving money on a high-end full frame purchase can free up funds to spend on other things that matter more than the camera. Considering even a $2,500 camera can create spectacular images in the right hands, those other things being like lights, diffusion, flags, stands, lenses, grips equipment, or for an indie film, like camera costs saved in the budget, either from camera rental or purchase, frees up money to spend on things that go in front of the camera, like makeup artists and their work, better costumes, and more investment in production design. Also, don't underestimate what a great colorist, which costs money, can do with a well-exposed, lit and composed scene, regardless of the camera, providing it's shot in a decent codec, ideally, but not necessarily raw. My fifth, and I think last point, large format won't make your film better. Like, are any of these absolute bangers lesser films for not being shot in a format larger than Super 35? Would larger format, film or digital, really make any of them more effective, powerful, or captivating? I mean, to be honest, a large format Jurassic Park shot on 70mm film would be pretty sick, but in the scheme of the impact of that film and how good it is, I just don't think it really comes into play. I mean, make no mistake, I think having large format capture as an option, a tool available to us, is awesome. I genuinely adore it. Like, I don't want to come across like I'm negative and I don't like full frame, because I love it. I'm just trying to make the case for independent productions and production houses. There's huge benefits to bucking this trend. The Joker, The Revenant, Hateful Eight, The Dark Knight, these are incredible films that large format capture from the Alexa LF to the Alexa 65 and 70mm film and IMAX was a perfect fit for, but for low budget filmmaking, I think S35 still allows for more than enough of a shallow depth of field and widens the list of available lens options, both to hire or purchase. Anyway, it's an aesthetic, that shallow depth of field, that can look really, really good, but I find when I'm in a really good location or the composition is really strong, like I kind of want to see it. Like not as sharp as the talent, but I don't want it to be swirly mush either. And this is coming from a guy who shoots handheld slow motion lens flare filled content wide open on Zeiss ZF primes like all the time. Chromatic aberration be damned. Like if you're like me, you make corporate or commercial content for a living, and the cameras you buy are going to be used on your passion projects too. And if those projects are narrative films with actors, then sticking with Super 35 instead of chasing the current trend, like it might prove fruitful for you. For the vast array of available lens choices, as well as the incredible deals to be had in the new and used market for both Super 35 cameras and lenses. You know, those of us with a fixed focus on the stories we're helping tell, rather than the desire to have the newest large format cinema beast, as brilliant as they are, potentially stand to save a lot of cash by sticking with the tried and true classic 35mm format.